let's get a show of hands going. Who here has a little more recording gear than they actually need? Oh, okay, good. So it's not just me. And I really shouldn't do this, but one second. Let me show you a piece of gear that I'm really excited about for 2024. No, actually, let's wait on that. We need to make some room first. So as a producer, as well as someone that reviews recording gear, my setup is always evolving, and some gear just doesn't make the cut anymore. This year was a big transition for me setup-wise, and I'm getting rid of some things that I just tried and didn't fall in love with, as well as a few things that I've been using for almost a decade. And if you have any of this gear, I'm commanding you to throw it straight into the dumpster. No, but seriously, none of this is bad gear, and it doesn't mean that you can't make great records with it. It just doesn't work for me and what I'm doing anymore. So by all means, if you're happy with it, then you should keep using it. Now, the first piece of gear that I'm leaving behind is something that I honestly really do like using. It's been called a game changer by tons of other producers and mixers, and for the right person, I agree. So if you're not familiar, the Sub Pack is basically a vibrating pad that generates low frequencies against your back, replacing a subwoofer with something that's basically silent. It's really cool, and it lets you make some really precise moves in the sub-bass frequency range. So you really just strap it into your chair with these Velcro straps, and then plugs into the wall. So if I like it so much, why am I moving on from it? Working with artists, I do a lot of in-person work, and I really need everyone in the room to be able to hear more or less the same thing. Now, believe it or not, there's a quirk to most studio rooms that actually helps us out. Most setups are a lot more bass heavy if you're sitting on the couch behind the producer. This is great because a lot of artists actually love to hear that hyped up bass. So when you switch from a subwoofer to something like a Sub Pack, you kind of get the opposite effect. Now, I'm feeling all the sweet low end in my chair, but the artist, they're getting less. There were more than a few times that an artist and I were working on a song, and I'd have to let them sit in the chair I was using to really feel what was going on in the low end. It kind of felt like I was working on a 3D movie, and I only had one pair of 3D glasses for the whole crew. After a while, I started only using the Sub Pack when I was alone, but at that point, it just became a hassle to actually set it up and tear it down between sessions. So the Sub Pack is going away for now. Now, next up is a piece of gear that has been with me for as long as I can remember. It's lived in my rack and been used on countless sessions, but it's time for me to say goodbye. So I've had this Art headphone amp for a very long time. And while it's worked as intended, it started to become really noisy to the point where it's borderline unusable. While it doesn't affect the actual sound of what I'm working on, having a clean headphone mix is important for getting great performances out of artists. And after swapping out just about every single cable in my headphone chain, I've determined that this bad boy is the culprit. Now, in that process, to make sure I tried everything, I scooped up this little cheap Monoprice headphone amp to see if that would make a difference, and it sounded so much cleaner than the Art did. Now, the nice thing about this not being a rack-mounted unit is that I can put this anywhere. So I can put it in the room with the artist and they can control their own headphone volumes. So I'm gonna stick with this for now, but if anyone has suggestions for a more fully featured headphone amp, something I can use to replace the Art, please let me know in the comments. But for now, we're gonna rock with this little guy. Now, next up on the list is actually something I don't have around to show you because I already sold it months ago, and I've since upgraded to something that suits my taste much more. So at my old studio, I used two pairs of monitors, a more modern pair on the outside and a pair of old school reference speakers on the inside, along with a subwoofer. Now that I'm in a home studio, I decided to scale it back and just stick to one pair. And for the first couple of years here, I was just using my old Atom A7Xs that I already had. Since then, I realized that I don't actually love the way that they sounded without having something else to compare to, like my NS10s. Something about the way that they deliver high, mids, and above just really wasn't doing it for me. So I decided to go for the Focal Alpha Evo Twin. I've always enjoyed Focal's monitors, or Focal, whichever, you let me know which it is. But I've always enjoyed their monitors when I've heard them in other studios, so I figured it was high time to make the jump for myself. Since they're meant to lay horizontally, I've actually moved them off my desk and onto stands. which actually frees up a pretty nice amount of space over here on my desk. So who knows, maybe some smaller reference speakers could be on the menu for the future. But for now, I am much happier with these speakers versus the Atoms. Now, the next thing I'm ditching in 2023 is something that I've bought time and time again. Most recording gear is supposed to last years, decades, or even a lifetime if you treat it right. But there is one piece of gear that we all use that sadly doesn't last nearly as long, and we still buy them over and over again. I'm of course talking about the computer. Up until recently, I was rocking this 2018 MacBook. I had to upgrade from my 2011 MacBook so that I could get Thunderbolt ports to go with the interface that I wanted. This bad boy right here. And frankly, this 2018-ish era of MacBooks has been kind of a headache for a lot of people. After more than one warranty repair, an expanding battery that actually made the bottom of my laptop balloon up, that needed replacement, of course, and various fan issues recently, I hit a point where it was just time to upgrade. So I picked up this new M2 MacBook to take its place. And so far, it's been everything you could want and more out of a recording computer. I've been able to work on songs with over 100 tracks and just as many plugins without even worrying about buffer size, let alone freezing any tracks. So that's been a huge upgrade compared to the workflow I was using with this computer. Not to mention, the lack of fan noise is a total game changer as well, since I can record vocals right next to the computer without picking up any background noise. I remember when Mac versus PC used to be the hot topic among producers, but it honestly seems like Mac won that battle a few years ago. So shout out to you if you're still rocking a PC. And last but not least, the most recent piece of gear leaving my studio is something I am making a much longer video about soon, so subscribe if you want to see that. But it's not actually in the room right now. I'm gonna have to wheel it in. Okay, here we go. Oh, sorry, camera. This was an idiot move. All right, well, I'm an idiot. So this is the next thing that's leaving my studio, this big ol' rack and all this nonsense that came with it. Yeah. For the longest time, I had a patch bay in here and it held all my outboard gear plus my interface. And the idea was that I could roll up my Snake, throw it in the back of the rack, and then pack my whole rig into a trailer for mobile sessions. However, you may have noticed that these things are now in my desk for the very first time. The patch bay is no longer invited to the party, and I've got everything directly plugged in from one Snake into the interface using the line in and outs from my Apollo to run all my outboard gear's inserts. So while I'm losing some flexibility, I'm gaining a whole lot of simplicity, and I'm cutting out a lot of failure points from my setup. And speaking of inserts, I didn't forget, I hope you didn't either. You probably noticed there's some space in this desk here, and so we're gonna fill it up with this bad boy. All right, oh, look how shiny that is. But we'll talk about this again in a couple weeks. So while it was fun to talk about gear that I'm moving on from, that is really not gonna help you improve your setup. So if you wanna hear about my absolute favorite things that I added to my setup in 2023, then check out this video right here next.